It's beginning of June, and despite the horrible weather we've had so far, it's starting to look like a flower farm around here.
Hell, I come 40,000 miles over here to see what them pretty little lips gonna do to me, baby. But every single time that I come around, it seems you got another man trying to keep you down, baby. Well, you might think you're driving me insane, but I ain't the game that you're trying to play. You know, I think you maybe ought to know this ain't my first rodeo. I've been around long enough to know some things you can't take back, some things you just got to let go. Yes.
Last year at this time, it was cold, and I would have been complaining about it, except for we were having the most incredible ranunculus season of my life. It'll never be that good again. This year, we went from late winter into, oh my God, it's summer. Today, it was 33. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's hot, and the plants have been feeling it. Right now, we are well into peony season. You know, beginning of June, normally peonies for us are gonna start in June. Early peonies are gonna be opening. We'll have peonies all June. This year, not so much. This peony is a pretty late peony. I don't know the name of it. It's just a landscaping peony. And it has been blooming already for 2 weeks. So the peony started really early. But it's hard to complain. It's hard to complain when you have peonies. Ian and I, every time we walk past this part of the garden, it doesn't look like much because it's been neglected, but just the smell of these gorgeous peonies, it's just incredible. Really happy that we have these, and I've been picking off of them too. Even though they look pretty good, I've probably picked getting close to 40 stems off of these 5 peony plants here, so peonies, you gotta love them. And at the end of this video, I'll show you my 300 peonies, which don't look as good as these, but I'm still excited about them. This garden you might not recognize. I'm currently calling it my meadow garden because it's been overtaken by weeds, but this is my shade garden. This is just a for me garden. It looked gorgeous this spring, had lots of bulbs blooming, very nice. We had these incredible Globe Master alliums that, you know, we planted in here last year, and they, you know, this is the first year they did a really good showing. Multiple flowers per spot, and they're so big, they're so fun. But, you know, it's not supposed to be a meadow. It's technically a shade garden, and there's some perennials. It's pretty overgrown. It's on the list. The reason why my personal gardens always turn into weedy messes is because my time and my energy is always going to my farm beds. Up here we have a perennial planting. These are perennials that at this point are in year 3, I think, most of them. Some of them are even year 4, and they're looking really good. You know, I was really happy with perennials on year 2, but seeing some of the stuff in year 3, year 4, it makes you really love perennials. Behind me, we have 2 beds of yarrow, and last year it was having issues. We had lots of bugs in it. This year, it's looking really good. I've been watering it lots. Plants, when they start to get heat stressed, when they start to get, you know, just too dry, it weakens the plant, and when the plant is weak, they are then susceptible to pests. And for me here specifically, aphids. Aphids get into stuff. So last year, I just wasn't watering as much in the spring as I obviously should have. I learned my lesson. This year, I watered it a lot more. And no aphids. So I'm gonna be able to get so many flowers. The first colors that bloom for me is a white, and it is just, you know, the weedy white. We found it here originally in our lawn. transplanted it into our farm beds because I love the look of it. By growing it in the farm, you know, giving it the care that it needs, it's a gorgeous yarrow. It's really nice. And then we have the yellow starting, but it's not gonna be long before this entire bed of mixed pinks and purples, lots of beautiful fun tones in this bed. You know, this year, this is a bed of 400 euro. You know, I look at each of these plants, there's like 10 stems per plant, you know, 4,000 pink euro. That's something to be excited about. I also, in this garden, have an entire bed of sedum, and I love sedum. I usually hoard it because it's one of my few flowers that can handle a frost and still be good to harvest, so I usually save it for Thanksgiving. But it's doing something really weird this year. It died like crazy. We have Roxy. Roxy wants to be in the video. I don't know what happened up here. I don't know why these sedums are struggling. There is a chance that I could have voles under the ground eating out the roots of the sedums, and that is then making the plants die. There's a chance that, I don't know, there could be some sort of disease that's gotten into here. I could have some sort of pest. It makes me very sad. I really love these sedums. I wish that there was still 400 in here. But sedum is also incredibly easy to propagate. So my kids, they rolled over one of my sedum plants, and at this point, being the 3rd year on these, like there's like 20 stems per plant. I took the stems, I put them in a glass of water, and they started to root. So it's gonna be really simple for me this year to replace the plants that I've lost, but hopefully I don't have to do it every year. If you have any idea why my sedums might be dying, let me know down below in the comments. The rest of these farm beds are greeneries, and these have been incredible for me. Most of these I planted, not necessarily expecting them to come back year after year. Behind me, I have a Russian tarragon. It's beginning of June, and it's like almost as tall as me. It's incredible. I have oregano. I don't harvest this when it's at the screen stage. I wait for it to get these purple flowers, which I love. And then I have anise hyssop. I have a really beautiful mountain mint up at the front. These greeneries, like it's a single bed of greenery, but at this point, because of them being perennial, they're such big, healthy, strong plants that I'm able to pick so much off of these. You know, I really was doing future Serina a favor when I planted these perennials, and seeing how good they perform on year 3, I'm really excited to get more in this year in other parts of the farm so that, you know, 3 years from now, future Serina will be thanking me. More perennials. I'm very excited about the perennials. The Baptisia, this is a blue Baptisia that is year 3 on it, and it's been really slow to get established, but this year I finally had flowers. You can see a few of these blue beautiful flowers left, and they have the seed pods that are forming because I didn't pick all the stems with the flowers. I'm maybe more excited about these seed pod stems than I am about the flowers, and the flowers are good, so I'm excited for upcoming years on that. This here is a perennial sunflower. I think it's called Sunny Days is the name of it, and every year I think that it's dead. Every year, like, it's the last thing to come up, but it goes from being like sad, isn't growing, to just grows so fast, like a sunflower, you know, to be expected. But, you know, I lost a few this winter. It's borderline for my zone, and I had a really cold winter this year, so it makes me happy to see it so full. This is some more Baptisia here, and this gives me the confidence to think that maybe I can grow perennials from seed. These came from Sunflower Steve. He sent me some of his yellow Baptisia seeds because I love them. His sunflowers, incredible, amazing, the best thing you've ever seen. But also yellow Baptisia, come on, so good. His Baptisias are amazing. But so he sent me seeds and I actually grew these. And every time I see them come back up in the spring, it makes me very happy because I'd be such a bad person if someone gifted me these beautiful seeds and then I killed the plants. So they're filling in really nicely. And then behind it, I have a Shasta daisy. This, yet again, I thought for sure it was gonna be dead. It was like really slow growing this year, but you know, we've had some heat now, beginning of June, and now I have buds. This is a beautiful double frilly frilly daisy. It's really gorgeous, and it dries really nicely, so I tend to pick every single stem off the plant. Probably part of the reason why why it's like sad by the time the fall comes. Maybe I overpick it. We have some echinops, and we have some euringium, some sea holly. These, you know, I need to weed these better, but year 3, man. Year 3 on these perennials. They're like finally like strong. They've like outcompeted the weeds. I haven't really done any weeding in here, which, you know, I can see when I look. There's lots of weeds, but the plants are coming up and they're looking like they're actually going to produce like a good amount of stems. So I'm really excited. We always start up here because it's the top of the farm, but you know, it's also like some of my favorite stuff. Every year, I think I get more excited about perennials. For the last handful of years, I've been saying we need to get raspberries. We need to plant raspberries on the farm because they make such an incredible foliage in the plants. You know, I really like to work with raspberry, and then I forget and it gets too late in the season, and then I'm like, next year I'll do it, and then I forget and it gets too late in the season. But 5-6 years ago when we moved here, we brought some of our raspberry plants with us, and they were like dead. They did not grow. We put them in the ground in July, beginning of July, we put them in the ground, nothing came up, nothing grew. Ian was like, well, that was a waste of time. We put dead sticks in the ground. The next year, like tiny little shoots grew. I was like, look, see, we didn't kill it. The year after that, you know, they finally grew into something. And then this part of the farm has just kind of been ignored as all of our focus has been on other areas of the farm. And now at this point, it's turned into a weed patch of raspberries. They spread under the ground and then pop up, and they're everywhere. And so I finally have that raspberry patch I've been saying I need to plant. I've been able to pick, like, at this point I've probably picked 100 stems of raspberries, and like I've barely even begun on picking it, and there's tons of berries for the kids. But the funniest part is this. We're inside my window greenhouse, which everyone loves, but it drives me crazy because it gets too hot. I can't grow anything in here. So pretty much as soon as we built it, we stopped using it. The main thing it gets used for on the farm is just like a photo op because it looks really cute. And my kids play in here sometimes. So over all that time of neglect, the raspberries have grown underneath, you know, because they do the runner thing, and they've taken over this greenhouse. So now I have hothouse raspberries. So there's raspberries that are producing. They're ripe, they're ready. It's like way too early in the season. The fruit is only like just begun outside of the greenhouse, but because these raspberries have decided that they want to live here, now I get to benefit. I get really early raspberry greens and really early fruit. Behind me is an area of the farm that we call the flower farm. And the reason why is because 5 years ago, when we started the farm, we had this small section of farm set aside, and this is where every single flower that we sold came out of. We were mostly selling veggies. We only gave about 1,000 square feet to flowers, and this was it. Last year we took over, you know, the entire farm for flowers, and we decided, you know, perfect to extend the perennials. I told you guys I'm obsessed with these perennials, so I had to get more. So this whole farm section turned into another perennial patch, and it looked like nothing last year because it got so weedy and the perennials were so small. They kind of just grew up a little bit, suffered through the summer, went dormant. But, you know, perennials, this is why I'm so excited about them. You know, even though it seemed like they were doing nothing but dying last year, what they were actually doing is building strong root systems, and this year, you know, there's going to be so much to pick. So we did lose some. It was a bad year, and I treated them very poorly. But so there's gaps here, but this entire bed is I can't remember. Phlox, perennial phlox. This entire bed is, I think that we have like 5 or 6 different colors. So we have things like David, this gorgeous white. That's the only name that I remember. It's my favorite. because I love white flowers, but we have so many fun colors. We have like a purple and a bright pink. It looks boring now, but by the end of the month, it's gonna be really incredible. Then on the other side, we have this whole section of bee balm, which just spread like crazy. This was not a hedge last year. This was small individual plants, and I'm really excited to see what it's gonna look like when it blooms. It smells amazing, the Monarda does, and it's a nice like purpley pink. Gets good height and amazing vase life. This was incredible for us last year, and so I'm excited to have lots of it again. I bought 25 poppies, and I thought I killed them all. I didn't think a single one of them made it, so I was really excited this year to see that 6 of them popped up. I let Ian pick the poppy. They're a little bit faded because the heat has just been really hard on them, but the color is so pretty. It's like this beautiful like purpley pink color. I think it's normally more of like a bright pink and less of this like faded antique-y tones. We're growing this for poppy seed heads, but the idea was kind of doesn't matter what the flowers look like when it's for seed heads. So we picked whatever we thought we'd enjoy the most, and I've been really enjoying them. So hopefully I baby them a little bit and they'll start to fill in this area, because I love the look of them. They're really fun. And then back here behind it is a patch of solidago or goldenrod. Last year these were like insane. They were like a single stem that came up, and they had these insanely huge flower heads. They were like too big. They were impossible to use. They basically were like okay, it's already a $50 bouquet. I used them for these really big $40 bouquets I sent down to the market. This year, my life's gonna be a little bit easier. They're gonna be a little bit more of a manageable size, but I'm excited to see how well this is established. And like I said, that other perennial section that I showed you guys, that's year 3, that's year 4. This is only year 2, right? So when I see this stuff already looking so good, it makes me really excited. Over on this side, this is an entire bed of Baptisia. We planted 100 Baptisia plants into here, but I knew with the other Baptisia that it was gonna take a while. It wasn't gonna be filling this bed. It was gonna be hard to keep it weeded. So last year I had some leftover feverfew plugs. I popped them in just as something to fill up the space, keep the weeds down, and shockingly, and also like, yes, very good for me, it survived the winter, and so it's back and it's blooming again like crazy. We're gonna have a lot of these beautiful, I think this is this is the single. I think this is Tetra. I'm really excited. I'm gonna be picking lots of it this week, and we have feverfew all over the farm. So I'm into the beginning of probably 6 weeks of feverfew, which makes me happy. We also have some stuff in here that were kind of experiments. I just got a little bit of it to see how it works out. So I got some salvia. This is a pink veronica. It hasn't started flowering yet. And I think behind me, I can't remember if this is a salvia too. I think so. It smells really sagey when I harvest it. This one at the front, it's gorgeous. I love it. The color is like so rich, but it's pretty short. But back here, this was like a great plant for me. And I can't remember specifically what it was. I think that this is Victoria Blue though. And this year I was using it. It bloomed really nicely along with my Ranunculus. It shouldn't normally this should bloom a bit later, Ranunculus a little bit earlier. The weather's been crazy, it's been doing some weird things. But, this had enough height. Ranunculus is short. It's one of the shorter things that we grow on the farm. So this had more than enough length to pair really nicely with a Ranunculus. This is, probably 16 to 18 inches is the stem length that I was getting on these. So even though it's, it's borderline for the bouquet work that I do, it was usable, and this color is great. It just glows. It's a really nice kind of spike filler, bringing in that color. Back here we have our yarrow. This is a yellow. I think I bought this. I can't remember the variety name on this one. But this I didn't grow from seed. This I bought as a plug. But This one I did grow from seed. And this is Field of Gold. And this is gonna be a yellow yarrow too. And it's really interesting to me because, so these are both yellow yarrows, but this one, it has the silvery foliage. It's a lot shorter. And then in the Field of Gold here, they're like a lot of height. The greenery is very different. This didn't bloom last year. When I planted this, they were really stunted when they got into the ground, and they never got to the point that they put on flowers. So I'm excited to see how these flowers are gonna compare, but I really like the way it's growing so far. So as long as the flowers are that bright yellow, because that's what I'm always looking for, the brights, I'm gonna be really happy to have so many of this. And then behind it is my favorite yarrow ever, and it's starting. I think next week I'm gonna have a ton of it. This is terracotta yarrow. You can kind of see the color here. The orange on this right now looks really orange, but as these flowers keep opening, they're gonna fade into this like really earthy tone. This is incredible to work with. I know I'm personally obsessed with orange. I want super bright orange in every bouquet, but I'm telling you, this isn't as Serina is crazy for orange type flower. This is something that is just, it looks really sophisticated. It blends really beautifully with pinks. You know, it's one of those colors that depending on what you pair it with, it just totally, completely changes the look. So you can't, as far as I know, you can't grow it from seed. You have to get it as a plug, but it's worth the hassle. Every year I'm like, I don't know, I think we need another 100, even though at this point I think we have like 200 plants of it in total. It's a little weedy in here. I haven't weeded this bed yet, but this is a bed of Fama scabiosa. I have it in the blue, and then in the white. And this is a perennial scabiosa that I was really excited about. The flowers are massive, gorgeous, so formal, so beautiful. But someone told me last year that apparently it's not perennial and that like it wasn't gonna come back. And that had me really nervous because they only produced a couple stems each, and I was fine with that for a first year flowering perennial, but I was like, well, I can't grow these if I'm only gonna get 1 or 2 flowers off each individual plant. So I was so excited to see, despite having a hard winter, almost, you know, I'd say probably 95% of the plants are back, and they're doing exactly what I hope they do. They're a lot more fuller, there's a lot more flower stems coming out of each plant. I'm gonna be able to pick enough off of this Fama scabiosa that I can justify putting more into the farm. I love working with it, but you know, if I was gonna plant a bed of it and then only get 100 flowers, you know, I can't do that. Gotta put in the yarrow, get 5,000 flowers instead. Finally, we have this insane mess. And this looks like a nightmare to some people, but this has me really excited. So these are 2 plants that I bought at my local nursery. You know, I think I bought 9 each in total, and they are nasty invasive weeds, which is exactly what I look for in a flower. We are super dry plants. It's hard to get things to spread. So something that is like spreads this easily means that it's quite drought tolerant. It means it can take the abuse of being cut and still come back. I'm very happy to see my garden being overtaken by this. So what I got is apple mint, which has this beautiful like fuzzy look to it, and like the smell, it smells incredible. It's this really soft, sweet mint. So great to work with in the bouquets. And then it's starting to get enough height. It has a really pretty like little white flower, so I can use it now or I can use it later. And then this is like, I love this. I love the look of it. It is a variegated Artemisia. That's what it was labeled as. I don't know. It was like a handwritten label. So I don't know exactly what this is, but it's spread like crazy. Like this, you know, there was like this much of it in the farm last year, and it's everywhere now. So I'm really excited. I'm basically gonna, you know, hack it to death, sell it like crazy. And the fact that it did this, I think it's just gonna come back year after year, slowly creeping to anywhere that has water, and just providing me with a lot of really easy easy to grow greenery, which is what I need here on the farm. And then behind me, we have the main farm. We're finally to it. And normally we do these farm tours like throughout the season earlier. We usually start with like an April farm tour and a May farm tour, and the farm's been embarrassing. So, you know, I hadn't even thought to do a farm tour because there was nothing to show. But finally, this week, it was like, okay, it actually looks like something. So now's the time. Now's to show you what we got going on here. It looks like a flower farm. There's plants. Really exciting surprise for me this year is this hedge. What this is I grew the annual Bergamot bee balm last year very, very poorly. I started it, it got super root bound, super sad plugs. I eventually did get it into the ground in the beginning of July, and it just sat there and suffered, and I was like, I'm sorry, I guess you're just not gonna grow for me. Thought it was dead, you know, winter came, did not expect this. Apparently it wants to suffer and then go through winter, because this is incredible. This should eventually flower. This should be more than just a greenery. But it's so tall, like it looks so good. It's so healthy and so happy. I'm so happy with how this turned out that I'm gonna replicate this again. Pretty soon, probably next week, I'm gonna start more of this. I'm gonna like make it suffer as plugs, plant it in the fall, and then maybe I can have this again, because this is amazing. This is like a third of a bed, and I feel like it could be greenery for weeks and weeks of bouquets. These 3 beds are beds that have kind of become semi-perennialized at this point, which is nice for us because it means we don't have to lift this fabric every single year. So what this is feverfews, and then on the other side, it's rudbeckias. And the feverfew and the rudbeckia are inconsistently perennial for me. So what happens every year is 40%, 50%, 60% of my plants die in the winter. The winters are just too harsh for it. They don't come back, but every spring, early, I grow more plugs. And then what I do is I dig through all the dead plants, I replace with new little baby plants, which are these like sad little shorties to get established in. And then my overwintered plants are there, they're a lot bigger. This works out really well for me because I end up getting a succession of blooms. The overwintered plants, they bloom a lot earlier, but so when they finish blooming, at that point, then my smaller, little stunted, you know, first year plants, they start blooming. So it ends up that I get a really good succession. The other nice thing is I've already showed you some of the feverfews that I have. The top of my property gets a little bit less sunlight than the feverfew down here. And so that actually also puts in like a bit of a delay. The varieties at the top of the property, they just get more water early in the spring, so they actually bloom earlier than my cooked in the sun varieties. So, you know, it's working really well so far. And then, you know, rudbeckia, right? It starts and it just keeps going. And it started like 2 days ago. Look at this incredible flower. They're so pretty. You know, I know a lot of people find them boring. A lot of people find the rudbeckia just a whatever flower. You know, even my customers aren't excited to buy rudbeckia, but they make such a great base to a bouquet. Even though I never have someone specifically request a rudbeckia bouquet, when I add in a few rudbeckia into my bouquets, those ones always sell a lot faster. So, you know, sometimes these old reliables, you know, they get underappreciated, but they deserve a lot of love. I love you. I've been trying to grow Bells of Ireland now for like 3 years. First, I couldn't get it to germinate, drove me crazy. You know, I tried to grow it as a seedling, no germination. This year, no problem. good germination. What I did is I started them in a tray in the middle of the winter, and then I threw them outside to get like frozen and snow all over it. And then as I wanted them to germinate, I brought them back inside. So making them suffer through winter is what it takes to get them to grow. So excited. I had like pretty good germination on it. I started lots because I was expecting bad germination. I planted them into the ground, and then they just sat there, and they sat and they sat and they didn't grow and they didn't do anything. And now at this point, they, as far as I can tell, I think they're flowering. Like, well, they're definitely flowering, but I feel like this is it. You know, they're like 10 inches tall, and this might be all I get out of them. These these sad little things. You know, it's a learning process, right? You know, I don't feel like this is a failure because this is a step in the right direction. I did get germination this year. I didn't get any into the ground last year when I tried. You know, and the weather's just been really hard. Everything's been suffering. So, you know, I'm not gonna give up. And Bells of Ireland dries really nicely. And one thing I'm always looking for in dried flowers is something green. It's one of the few things that I don't already have established in my dried flower routine. So worst case scenario, I could probably harvest a bunch of this, dry it, and be able to repurpose it into the winter. So it won't be a complete loss, and it smells amazing and it looks really cute. The next bed I have here is direct seeded sunflowers, and they're doing pretty good. They're growing. I think that at this point, 3 weeks, and I'll have my first sunflowers, you know, beginning of July, which is kind of perfect timing, right? That's right when customers really start asking for the sunflowers. So yes, I did something right. Behind me, I have an entire bed of Asiatic lilies. So these are the really bright colored, no scent ones. Ian doesn't let me grow the orientals anymore. He says they're too stinky. This I planted, I don't know how many years I'm going on this. This is definitely like at least year 3. This might even be year 4. This got planted a long time ago. And every year I come and I pick a ton of lilies out of it, but they just keep coming back, right? Like some of these, I'm like, okay, this is gonna have like 20 buds on it. The stem it's like, might as well be a palm tree. This one probably hasn't been picked for a few years, but in here, there's all the little side shoot plants that they send up, you know, and I probably am not gonna pick this, but next year I will. And yeah, they've perennialized really well as a cut flower. The one problem with lilies perennializing is you can't control when they bloom. In there I have, I don't know, looks like about 8 or 9 different varieties, different colors. And so the different colors bloom at different times, but this entire bed kind of needs to get picked in a 2-week window. But that actually works really well for me. It works so well for me to kind of have a lily season rather than to just have lilies all year by succession planting it, that I did another bed of lilies. You can't really see it here because we have a mustard mix that self-seeds in the farm, and I like to eat it in the spring, so I've left it to self-seed again and to kind of mulch the lily bulbs that I planted in here this spring. But yeah, I have this entire bed filled in with lilies. The height works really good. The reason why I did it is we have our sprinklers. I'm limited for how tall I can have in these beds, and they get really hard to maintain with my sprinkler lines down here. So they work great. They only ever get as tall as my sprinklers, so they never block my water. They can just get established and be here year after year. Each of these beds probably have 500 lilies in them. They're spaced enough to be happy and healthy, and you know, having 1,000 lilies, you know, if they bloom out across the course of 2 to 3 weeks, you know, gives me like a couple fun weeks of June lilies, and then I'm on to the next focal, and I don't have to worry about having a long-term management plan for them of planting, succession planting, succession planting, succession. Our channel is you can't eat the grass, and I still stand behind that really firmly. Like, who wants to eat grass? But I have discovered you can make a lot of money off grass when it comes to cut flowers. And so we put in an entire bed of grass here. This is different decorative grasses like millets. I do what's called Highlander, Lowlander, a few different drop varieties. This bed produces like so many stems for me. It makes a lot of money and it makes me very happy to see it growing, because it's one of those things I forget, and I usually plant it too late in the season, so I only have it for the fall, but I'm definitely gonna have some for the summer. So we had to stop filming because the neighbor was doing some work with his tractor over on his orchard and it got really loud. So it's now tomorrow. And
or today was yesterday.
Yeah, one of those. And so I think I know where we left off. So let's start there. This was a really tough year so far on the farm. It was very, very cold and then very, very hot. So what happened is normally I will plant my seeds out in the beginning of March, mid-March, and then as soon as the weather hits to warm enough, they'll germinate and we're good to go. But this year it was cold for so long, so I never got any seeds into the ground. And when it finally was in that window for when I'd put things like larkspur, beplurum, nigella, you know, all these cooler loving plants, snapdragons, we ended up going not into spring, but into full on summer. It was 30 degrees, heat wave, craziness. I got the seeds in the ground, but a lot of these seeds actually need cold weather to germinate. And so I have a lot of beds that look like this, which is to say, they don't look like anything. I have no idea what is going on here. You know, this bed specifically, as far as I can tell, the only thing that's growing in here is chard, because I had chard go to seed in here last year. So it's weeds, you know, but I planted seeds into these, you know, and with it being beginning of June, I kind of just have to come to terms with the fact that there isn't going to be any spring crops, and there's no point trying to get them, you know. Just have to think of next year. Here I have a bed of Lisianthus, and this is good because it's not a spring crop, it's a summer crop. It likes the heat. But even it is really struggling. Since I've planted it into the ground, it hasn't really grown. And when I show you my Lisianthus in the tunnel, I think that will make it a lot more clear. This is a spot of my Lisianthus in the tunnel. I think I planted about 2,000 in here. I got a lot of Lisianthus in here, and this is looking like especially bad. When I put these into the ground, they basically were this size, and I planted them in March. So, you know, it's been full on. They've been here, sitting here, not doing anything for 2 months. I can see that they're starting to grow, but 2 months is a long time for something to just kind of sit in the ground and pout. You know, I think that it was too cold when I first planted it, and then it was too hot. It was so much extreme, so it took it a really long time to get established. This section here, this looks a little bit healthier. These have finally started to grow, but even this side of the tunnel, you know, it kind of has only started to look like this in the last week or two. It was very sad and very upset with what it was dealing with. We've fertilized it. You know, we've been watering it. It's not like we've only been using the drip to water it. It shouldn't be this way. But the best I can do is just do whatever I can for it and then cross my fingers that, you know, it'll bounce back. The Lisianthus, we don't expect to be harvesting off of it until, you know, like August, September. So it still has a lot of time to grow and get happy. You know, it's been a hard year even for things like the Lisianthus, which you think, you know, It's growing them in the plugs that's the tricky part, not necessarily taking care of them in the ground inside a tunnel. The Lisianthus, it was ready early and it was planted out early. It was in the ground in March when it was really, really cold. It was in the tunnel, so, you know, it made sense. Another crop that, you know, kind of I grew it to be ready to plant out really early, you know, this I had in March at the same time that I had the Lisianthus, but I didn't plant it out because it was just too cold, is my status. I also have some paper daisies and some amobium, like a few, like these are kind of, they like the cool, they want to get established in the cool weather, and then we grow them for dried flowers. And so this stuff I held back. And the problem with holding things back is they start to really suffer when they don't have the space to grow. So this is what could have happened to the Lisianthus if I didn't plant them out. And the answer is nothing good. These, they didn't have to struggle through those really cold periods, those really hot periods. I mean, they have to deal with the heat now. But by the time I planted them, they were almost dead looking. They're a little bit easier. They're a little bit, you know, more forgiving. Here now in the last 2 weeks, it's finally starting to grow, right? These look like what they should be. They're green, they're leafing out, they're getting bigger, but you can even see like, you know, these are starting to be healthy plants, but they're very small, you know, and when I compare this to last year, when, you know, they could have been established out earlier, they could have been growing slowly. Last year we had them blooming already. So I'm glad to see that I haven't killed them, but you know, even this, which is starting to look like a success, is really a crop that's been struggling. This here is kind of a good example of when you plant things at the right time, instead of, you know, planting it and having it suffer, or holding it back and having it get root bound. This is a weed. The weed that this is Strawflowers, because I had Strawflowers growing here last year, so it's self-seeded. But when we went to plant the status into the garden, you know, they kind of were just barely up. They had only just started to germinate in the ground, but because of the fact that it never had to have any transplant shock, it germinated at the right time in the right conditions. This plant is like way further ahead than, you know, a lot of the things in the rest of my farm. Kaya, you're ridiculous. You cry at me all day to go outside. We're stopping to do bug removal. Ian's been after me because this section of the farm is a really bad weedy mess. Part of it makes sense, right? This is my Rudbeckia hedge that, you know, I've been cultivating for a few years now. About half of it dies, but the Indian summer Rudbeckia self-seeds so well that it fills in by the time it gets flowering. So, you know, this is good, this is intentional, but all of this is weeds. And the reason why I'm not doing anything with this is, as I said, I planted all these spring crops and they didn't germinate. So the only place that I kind of am gonna have this window of spring crops, which I'm really gonna need, you know, like I'm gonna start scrambling to find things. And it's in here, it's stuff like, you know, this larkspur along the front. It's starting to germinate, things that have self-seeded. So it is weeds, but some of those weeds are flowers that I just didn't get the opportunity to have germinate anywhere else on the farm. So,
but mostly larkspur.
Yeah, some bachelor buttons. There's a whole mix of stuff in here. It doesn't make sense. It kind of illustrates how desperate I am for anything in, you know, the next coming weeks. This tunnel here is another example of things are going so badly that I am kind of allowing weeds to happen, because some of those weeds are things that I'm not able to grow by planting. So this tunnel last year we did really good with all of these cool weather spring crops. We had amies, we had dara, we had orlaya, we had snapdragons, we had calendula, we had a whole mix of stuff in here, and not all of it got used. A bunch of it kind of self-seeded into the ground. I was really happy with it. I tried to do the same thing again, and nothing really happened. At this point, I have a little bit of Orlaya that's blooming, but last year my Orlaya was this tall. I was picking and picking off of it. This year, you know, I'll be lucky if I'm able to use the stems at all. But as I look down into this mess that is my garden, you know, I'm recognizing Orlaya that's self-seeded. I'm recognizing snapdragons that's self-seeded. I'm recognizing things that are going to be of use to me. So because what I planted is kind of a failure, I'm allowing it to naturalize in hopes that, like my other weedy section, I'll be able to get something out of it. You know, even my snapdragons that I planted this year, they're not looking good. They're looking really bad. They did the same thing. I planted the seedlings out and it was too cold for them. It was too much of a shock. It went straight from too cold to too hot. That was really hard for them to handle. And now they're blooming, very short, very slim. They're not a high quality stem. I'll still be able to use it. I'm still very happy to have it, but it's not what this was supposed to be. This was supposed to be very valuable for me, and it's going to end up being a filler that allow me to kind of scramble a little bit over the next few weeks. You know, and then on the other side in here, you know, you can kind of see that there was stuff in here. This is the anemones that we planted. You know, I put in, I don't know, like 800, and we just haven't been able to pick them at all. They never got tall enough. Anemones, as the season goes on, the stems slowly get taller and taller and taller. This is like a shade tunnel. This should make everything in here stretch. You know, and here we are, they're finishing up blooming, and this is still the length on them. You know, it's like 9 inches. I can't put this into a bouquet. One thing that we did really poorly last year was weed management. We were just too overwhelmed with all the harvesting. We didn't have enough time to stay on top of keeping the weeds down. And so things got really bad. And this year we're gonna suffer the consequences of that. We had lots of weeds, they dropped lots of weed seeds. That means, you know, things are going to be even worse than they were last year. In order to make that more manageable, we're trying to get down landscape fabric as much as possible, especially in the spots that we knew were really bad. You know, we're triaging the spots that were the worst weeds of all, get the prioritizing on the landscape fabric, you know, and then we're working from there. So this makes me happy. This was a nightmare last year. It's not going to be this year. We'll still need to weed throughout the holes, but the maintenance on this is going to be fairly simple. I have a bed of marigolds in here. Last year we trialed some different marigolds. I found out that the cocoa series was my favorite of all, and so I sourced out yellow, gold, and orange cocoa, and I loved having the marigolds so much. I used it in so many bouquets. Last year I had 1 full bed of marigolds. This year we're having 2, well, and actually 2.5. I had leftovers and I filled in an empty space because I love marigolds. I can't have too many. But yeah, so I'm really excited to get to see if the cocoa orange and yellow grow as good as the gold has for me. And then here I have cinnamon basil. Last year what I decided was the lemon basil that I'd been growing to partner with cinnamon basil was just not good enough. So this year, only cinnamon basil. So I got an entire bed of it, and this is something that we like to succession. So, you know, this week I'm going to be planting another round of it. But yeah, it's a really amazing filler. In this bed, we have a Sedum or floss flower. It's something that I have avoided in the past because it's not drought tolerant. I don't know how much it likes the heat, but we're gonna give an experiment on it. If I can get it, it would be amazing. It's these beautiful purple flowers. So, you know, there's like 400 in there, fingers crossed. And then we love anise hyssop. It's amazing, it's incredible. So this is a lot. This is a lot of anise hyssop. This is like 600 plants. And the plan with the anise hyssop is we're gonna start treating it like the way we treat the feverfew and the rudbeckia. Half of it will die off. You know, every spring we can plant new ones in, but then we'll just establish this as a permanent anise hyssop bed. The Ranunculus tunnel was underwhelming this year. Basically, this was like the worst weather ever for Ranunculus because I got it into the ground and it was like, oh, okay, it's nice and cool, it's gonna get established. And then it was like 30 degrees and it's like, no, okay, which it hates. I'm amazed we got anything off of the Ranunculus at all. I expected the Ranunculus to perform exactly like the anemones. I expected them to throw up a handful of unusable too short flowers and then just die on me. But I ended up, you know, there's a lot of Ranunculus in here. There's like 1,500 Ranunculus in here. And so when I say like, oh, I got like 1,000, 2,000 stems, you know, that's still not saying very much, but it's a lot better than zero. Because if we didn't have any of these, we wouldn't have had anything to sell over the last few weeks. But the thing that I really want to show you guys in here is something that I'm really excited about, and I have some experience with it in previous years, so I know that it's going to be successful. The center bed here, it was supposed to be tulips, or it was. We had tulips in crates. And what we're doing now throughout the summer, it's still gonna be its same thing, but it's gonna be glads in crates. And so what I've been doing is every week or two, I've been taking an empty crate, filling it up, and then planting, like they're an egg carton, lots and lots and lots of glads in here. And they don't care. They don't mind at all. And I find also with the glads, when I plant them really tight together, they almost self-support each other, so they're a bit less likely to fall over than if they're spaced in the field. So they're looking pretty good. I'm still a few weeks out before my very first planting is gonna start blooming, but you know, this here is a couple weeks old, it's growing. I have a Succession up at the front that you can't see it yet, but it's been in here for a week now, and so I'm sure any day now the spikes are gonna start poking up. And you know, next week I do more and I do more and I do more. I have all my glad bulbs stored in the cooler, and this is gonna keep me in something, some sort of focal that I can use throughout the entire summer. Glads are fairly fast. They're like a 75-day crop. So they're really saving my butt this year. And then it's not so physical being able to do them in the crates. You know, when I harvest them, they're kind of tight and they're together. When I plant them, it's really simple for me to just do it. I don't have to dig any holes or any trenches. And then when they're done too, I just I dump out, empty the crate. If I wanted to save the corms, I could. They are not perennial here. So it's not like doing them in the crates is making it so I can't have them next year. If I put them in the ground, I couldn't have them next year anyways. So this is working really good. This was like overwhelmed with spiny amaranth weed last year, so fabric. There's still a lot of them. They're starting to grow like crazy up through the holes in the fabric. But 1,000 in the holes of fabric means it would have been like 1,000,000 without the fabric, so I'm glad to have it. What I have in here is a lot of Strawflowers. So I actually have almost 3 beds, about 2.5 beds of Strawflowers. When I realized how bad the summer was gonna be, I shifted focus a little bit. I grew lots of these Strawflowers and the status, things like that, because I wanted to have enough to plant, and then I wasn't gonna plant them all. But when I realized maybe there's not gonna be very many flowers this summer, I decided, hey, let's focus on getting some more dried. Let's focus on being able to sell lots this winter. And so, you know, I've gone really hard on these. They're starting to establish. We are not going to be picking them for stems so much this year, as we're going to be picking the heads off for using in our Christmas ornaments and other different crafting ideas. So even if these plants don't get super tall, they'll still be great for me. And then one thing, I was really excited about this crop. I'm not giving up on it yet, but it is looking pretty short and flowering. This is my tricalium. I bought plugs on this. It's apparently really hard to germinate, so I'm glad I bought plugs and not seeds. But it's dealing with the same conditions that the Lisianthus had to deal with. I didn't plant this right out in March. I ended up potting this up into a bigger plug tray, but it got planted out when it was colder than what it ideally likes, and it also got left in the tray longer than it ideally wanted to as well. You know, I bought this, they came in with the Lisianthus. My plan was, you know, Lisianthus can go in early to mid-March. This I potted up into a bigger cell tray. I was thinking beginning of April I'd be able to put this in, you know, and so this might never turn into anything usable. But despite that, I feel like I'm learning a lot about the crop, and I've actually never seen this bloom. So, you know, even if it blooms short, we are the only ones who get to enjoy it on the camera. I am excited to see what the flowers look like. This here is a new crop for us too. This is safflower or carthamus. Safflower carthamus. And this is a really cool, it looks like a thistle, and then it has like orange flowers to it. I heard another flower farmer in Colorado Colorado is an area that has really similar conditions to us. Cold winters, hot summers, dry, drought, and they said that this is like one of their favorite bases to their bouquets. They use this as a filler. They don't necessarily even use this when it has the orange flowers. They use it more when it has those thistle pod type shape to it. So we're giving it a try. This is our first succession. It's starting to green up. You know, I've never grown this before, so I don't know exactly how it'll go, but we're gonna try 2 successions on it to hopefully be able to have it in the summer and then to have it in the fall. And I'm really excited for the potential. This is a work in progress area. We have our cosmos. I hate cosmos. Every year I'm always like, I'm only gonna have so many. 1 bed, that's my max. But the plan for this year was to grow a lot more volume and to have things that we could sell to florists. And I know that the cosmos have a great place in wedding work. So even though I don't use them so much in my bouquets, I imagine that they could have been very valuable for me, for florists. We'll see. I'm putting 2 beds in, and I actually have 2.5 beds in total that I'll probably plant out. The problem with cosmos is they're easy at this point. You know, when they start blooming and you're happy to have lots, but they quickly go from like, oh, this is amazing, I have flowers to pick, to it's chaos, I picked it 4 times in a day and I still can't manage it. I often get overwhelmed by it and just kind of like hack it down to the ground, and then it starts to flower again, and I'm like, okay, maybe we can keep up, but they're beasts, they're weeds, basically. So I'm happy to have all these cosmos now, but I suspect I'm gonna regret it once summer comes. It's gonna be beautiful though. It's gonna be like this aisle, just like floaty cosmo beauty. And then on the other side over here, I have another bed of my marigolds, and then potential. The farm's getting pretty close to full, you know? It's been hard to deal with the challenges. You know, and June is late to be finishing up the farm. Usually the goal is to get everything kind of its first planting out in May. But we haven't completely missed the mark. We just need the weather to cooperate. Okay, and I promised at the beginning of the videos, I'm gonna show you my peony patch. So let's go see it. Behind me is our 300 peonies that we planted last winter. They were these big, beautiful tubers, and I'm excited to see that big, beautiful tubers turn into actual, real peony plants. We had flowers, they all bloomed open crazy early. They bloomed so early, I wasn't even planning on letting them bloom. I was gonna take the buds off, and I just didn't get to it. But at this point, they've finished. But they have good color. They haven't really been dying back much. I'm really happy with how they're looking. You know, this is only year one. They say it takes 3 years before peonies kind of get established and you should start picking off of them. And with the plants looking this good already, I think there's a chance I can do a little bit of picking next year. So, you know, I'm excited. Ian's excited. He got to see his flowers on them, despite me telling him I wouldn't let him. It's been a really tough year this year. You know, things are not going to plan. Things are not ending up the way that I wanted them to be. But despite that, you know, it's always a pleasure to be able to spend so much time outside and to spend so much time in such a beautiful place. You know, even though summer isn't going to be what I want it to be, it's not like everything's lost, right? All the work that we're doing now is setting us up to have a really strong fall. We can have a really incredible winter with all that dried flowers. You know, it's still beautiful and it's still a joy. And I'm really excited to be able to, you know, do another one of these videos for you guys in a few weeks and show you just how quickly everything changes.